I was about 12 or 13 years old when the Duval County Juvenile Court sentenced me to the Florida School for Boys at Marianna for running away from the Children's Home Society orphanage in Jacksonville, Florida. Early one morning, Dr. Robert Loyal Curry called me to the head office. He told me that I would soon visit the White House, which was a torture room for boys who broke one of their many rules or tried to escape. I was sent to the school for trying to escape from the Children's Home Society orphanage in Jacksonville. I had been incarcerated there for 10 years for the crime of having no parents to care for me. When I heard that they were taking me to this White House, an extreme fear came over me. I almost passed out and was trembling so badly that my legs collapsed under me. I fell to the floor and lay there. The men told me to get my sorry butt up and sit down on the hard, wooden bench outside the office. I waited there for the two men who would take me to the White House. I knew their routine well, as I had heard about it from many other boys who were taken there. Other than the time I learned that I had cancer and would die within 6 months, I have never known more fear than when I was told I was going to be taken to this place. After a wait of about 30 minutes, these two men came to get me. They grabbed me by my arms and lifted me off the bench. There were several other boys in the office with me, so I had to try to act as though I was not scared, but they knew. The two men walked with me across the grass circle that divided the offices from the White House. We stopped at another office and a man, Troy Tidwell, took the place of one of the men holding me. We continued walking toward the mess hall. As we rounded the building, I could see it right in front of me, the White House. My mind was just going crazy with fear. My thoughts seemed to be swimming in a circle, like a cat that had been thrown into a cold river. I was so scared, I could not think straight. Words were coming from my mouth, before my mind could think of what it was I was attempting to say. I was trying to decide if I should run and hide or maybe kill myself. Anything was better than what was going to happen in there. When we reached the door, one of the men took out his keys and stuck one into the lock. I looked back over my shoulder and I saw about 50 boys. They stared in silence. As the door opened, an ungodly odor filled my nose and I could hardly breathe. I remember trying to step through the doorway, but the odor was so overwhelming that I fell in the short hallway inside. One of the men grabbed me by the back of the shirt collar and jerked it up around my neck, choking me. One of the buttons fell off my shirt and hit the floor, rolling very slowly around the corner. Almost everything was happening in slow motion. My whole body was just numb and it was very difficult for me to breathe. I tried to pull the shirt down from around my neck, but the man jerked it once again and hit me on the top of the head with his knuckles. I hit the floor again and bloodied my nose from the impact. At that point, I was not walking at all, my legs would not work. The two men picked me up and carried me into a small room, which had nothing in it except a bunk bed and a pillow. They put me down on the floor and ordered me to lie on the bed facing the wall. Crying, I pulled myself up onto the edge of the bed and wiped the blood from my nose onto my shirt sleeve. When I looked up at the men's faces, they were plain, cold and hard. They had no expression whatsoever. I did what they told me to do. One of them said to move my hands to the top of the bunk bed and grab the bar at the headboard. I did so as quickly as I could. Not one sound could be heard. I felt one of the men reach under the pillow and slowly pull something out. I turned over quickly and looked at the one who was standing near me. He had a large leather strap in his hand. "Turn your goddamn head back toward the wall," he yelled. I knew what was going to happen and it was going to be very bad. I had been told what to expect by some of the boys, who were taken to the White House. I never heard from some of them again. I also heard that this giant strap was made of 2 pieces of leather, with a piece of sheet metal sewn in between the halves. Again, everything was dead silent. I remember tightening my buttocks as much as I could. Then I waited and waited, and waited. I remember someone taking a breath, then a footstep. I turned over very quickly and looked toward the man with the leather strap. There was an ungodly look on his face and I knew he was going to beat me to death. I will never forget that look for as long as I live. I tried to jump off the bed, but I was knocked backward when the leather strap hit me on the side of the face. I jumped to the end of the bunk and began trying to climb up the cement wall, but there was nowhere to climb. Mr. Hatton kept beating me with the leather strap about the chest, back and legs. The men grabbed me, pulled me down and held me to the floor. I was yelling to God to save me, begging for someone, anyone, to help. There was blood all over everything. It was everywhere. "Please forgive me. Please forgive me," I repeated at the top of my voice. "Please forgive me. Dear God, please help me." But it didn't do any good. God didn't hear me that day. Maybe he was smart enough not ever to enter the White House, even to save a child. After about 5 minutes of begging, pleading and crying, they told me to get back on the bed and grab the top rail again. They warned that if I tried to get off the bed, the whole thing would repeat from the beginning. I slowly pulled myself up off the floor and got back onto the bed. Again, I grabbed the rail and waited. Everything became quiet, except for the 2 men breathing really hard. Once again, I tightened up my buttocks and waited. Then all of a sudden, it happened. I thought my head would explode. The thing came down on me over and over. I screamed and kicked and yelled as much as I could, but it did no good. He just kept beating me over and over. However, I never let go of that bed rail. Then there was nothing. The next thing I remember, I was walking into Dr. Curry's office and the secretary asked me who I was. I was so bloodied that she could not recognize me. Minutes later, still in a stupor, I was taken to Mr. Hatton's office. I was sitting on a wooden bench in the one-armed man's office. I remember wiping the slobber and blood from my mouth. My body felt like it was on fire. I stood and found that I hardly could. God, it hurt badly. I will never forget that until the day I die. One of the men in the office yelled at me to sit down. I told him that I had to go to the bathroom really bad. He pointed at a doorway and said that it was the bathroom. He told me to make it quick. "I'm gonna tell somebody about this here when I get out of here one day," I mumbled. "Talk like that around here will have you wake up dead one morning, sonny boy," said the man, as he squinted his eyes and pointed his finger at me. I slowly walked into the bathroom and closed the door. I looked in the mirror. There was dried blood all over my black and blue face, my hair and in my mouth. I took my torn shirt off, which was hanging from the waistband of my pants, and then I turned around and looked into the mirror. My back was black and blue, and also bloody. I almost panicked out of my mind when I saw my reflection. I looked like a monster. I started to cry, but I covered my mouth with both hands so no other boys would hear me. I loosened my belt buckle to get my pants down. It was very painful, but the worst was yet to come. Once they were down, I noticed that my legs were all bloody and my skin was black in color. I stood over the toilet and tried to urinate, but it just would not come out. I decided to take my underwear down and sit on the toilet until I could go, but the underwear would not come off, it was stuck to my rear end and legs. The cotton material had been beaten into the skin of my buttocks and was dried with blood. I pulled my pants back up and washed my face, mainly because I did not want the other boys to see that I had been crying. I was so scared that I could not stop shaking. Finally, I walked back into the outer office and saw Mr. Sealander, my cottage house parent, standing by the doorway. He took me back to my cottage. He called the office to complain about what happened to me. Then he took me to the hospital where the old nurse, Mrs. Womack, and Dr. Wexler sutured up the tears to my buttocks and soaked me in Epsom salts. With tweezers, she pulled the remaining pieces of underwear from my skin. Then she petted that big, ugly cat of hers and sent me away. Why was this done to me? I never knew until years later why I was beaten like that. They did it because I said, "Shit," when I slipped on the diving board at the pool. I do not even remember saying that kind of word. I never was a boy who cursed. I will never forget for as long as I will live, that vicious beating done to me without even knowing why. I will never forget the monster that I saw in the mirror that day. I will never forget what adults are capable of doing to a child. I will never forget that the state of Florida was behind what happened to me and to many, many other boys, just for running away from an abusive orphanage. I do not hold any grudges against those men. If Mr. Haddon had not beaten me, another man would have done the job. Those were the rules. To them, it was a job they were paid to do. However, I have always wondered if R.W. Haddon was ever troubled the least little bit by that beating. I have always wondered if Dr. Curry, the psychologist, got a sexual thrill out of putting a 12 or 13-year-old boy in his place in that manner. I spoke with Mr. Troy Tidwell on the telephone on February 11, 1999. He is now 72 years old and still lives in Marianna, Florida. I asked him if he could locate Mr. Sealander. He and I joked about the past and had a few laughs together. I'm sure he had no idea who I was. He may not even remember that far back, although I think it is more likely that he does. How could someone not remember beating little boys like that? I thank you for caring, Mr. Sealander. Wherever you are, I want to thank you for your kindness and understanding. Because of that one kind deed, I have learned to trust, respect and take the word of my fellow man. Thank you for being kind to me and making me feel that I was worth something to someone. I will always remember, respect and love you for that kindness. I wish to end this story by thanking the individuals, whoever you are, who had the heart, compassion and guts to stop these horrible evil deeds committed by the state of Florida. Though there is very little doubt in my mind that such things are still happening even today. Roger Dean Kaiser Sr. I would like to make one addition to the story which I did not add above. I was asked to lie down on the bed, face the wall and bite into the dirty, bloody pillow and I did as instructed. When the first blow was struck, the leather strap hit my buttocks but the end of the strap continued on and hit me in the right side of my waist. It was like I had been hit with a red-hot branding iron. The same type one had seen used to brand cattle on Owen Bolton's Rainbow K Ranch in Silt, Colorado when I was a young boy. When that strap hit me I actually smelled the burning of cattle hide within a second after being hit. All I could think about was that one cow that caught fire and ran off into the brush. Off the bed I jumped screaming at the top of my voice, the entire time thinking my body had caught fire. That is a fear I still live with even to this day. Jim Blunt. Lessons from my boyhood. In 1949, the county judge of Sarasota sentenced me to be incarcerated at the Florida Industrial School for Boys in Marianna. I was barely 12 years old. After a grueling all-day ride in a 1949 Ford Sheriff's car, I was happy to finally get there. That relief didn't last long. Within 15 minutes of my arrival, I was told, "The judge did not send you here to be rehabilitated. He sent you here to be punished, and that is damn well what we are going to do." This person proved to be a prophet, I guess, because that is damn well what they did. The next 2 years were to set the direction of my life for the next 60 years. It did not take long to receive my first introduction to the White House, though at that time, we referred to it as the ice cream plant. On a beautiful sunny Saturday, following the noon meal, my name was called, along with others, to assemble on the mess hall porch. Anytime your name is called out, you are in serious trouble. About 6 of us were then led next door to the ice cream plant. As the small door was swung open, we were stunned by the putrid odor and by the darkness and gloom of this place. My first thought was, this must be exactly what the death chamber at Rayford must be like. We were forced into a very small room and ordered to face the wall. What seemed to be a faceless voice monotone is that we were there to be serviced. He told us that when our name was called, we were to quietly go across the hall to the cot room. We would lie on the cot, grab the iron bar and turn our head toward the wall. He told us that if we cried, screamed, made a sound of any kind or resisted, that the spanking would be started all over again. He said, "Don't worry, we have all day if we need it." By now, everything seemed surreal. I wasn't sure if this was really happening. It seemed as if my mind had drifted off into a stupor or some kind of coma. And then, my name was called. Instant terror set in. Mr. Dozier was standing in the door with a blank, emotionless stare. Mr. Haddon was standing by the cot, and in his hand he had the most terrifying instrument of torture I have ever seen. And when I saw the cot, I was near passing out from the fear and terror. I noticed the mattress was folded under about halfway down. When I lay down, this fold elevated my buttocks and thighs for what, I figured, would make a better target. I grabbed the bar and faced the wall. No way out now, so I did the only thing left for my defense. I set my will that I would not give these vile subhumans the enjoyment of my crying or begging. I would remain unmoving and totally silent. Thank God that helped, and so I felt, if only for a moment, that I got back at them and their system. I took away a little of their perverse pleasure. What followed was the loudest noise I can recall and the most searing, crushing pain I had ever known. I felt as though they had poured gasoline on me and set me ablaze. My body cried out, but I never made a sound. I was terrified and I thought they were going to kill me. I just laid there and thought of my parents. After 20 lashes, I stopped counting. When the beating finally stopped, I could not hear them tell me to get up. The noise of their handiwork had been too much. They had to shake my shoulders to get me up. Once I was on my feet, I was forced to look Mr. Haddon in the face so he could be sure I wasn't crying. His eyes were very cold and hard, yet, they had a certain gleam to them. So, I knew he enjoyed my pain and torture and his part in it. When I looked at his face, it seemed to me as though I was face to face with Satan. It would be years later before I put it all together and decided that what I saw in those vile, distorted faces must have been a vulgar, disgusting look of perverted sexual release. I still believe that, when our punishment was over, we were led out and sent back to our cottages. It was then that we realized that the faceless voice never told any of us why we had been punished. It is still a mystery even today, 60 years later. I still don't know the reason. When I returned to Jefferson Cottage, the only thing I wanted was a shower. I had to do something to remove the filthy stench from me and to clean up the blood that had come from my buttocks and thighs. After my shower, I found a mirror and saw that from my hips, down the back of both thighs, to the back of my knees was all black. This color and the pain took weeks to go away. As with most of us, other beatings and punishments would follow. One such event gave me a valuable lesson in trusting others. One friend had crafted for himself a very sharp 4-inch knife. Rumor had it that they knew of the knife and were going to search him. I took the knife just before 2 guards grabbed and searched him. When he talked to them and then pointed to me, I knew I was being set up. I quickly tried to throw the knife into some nearby shrubs, but as luck would have it, it stuck into one of those little wooden signs in front of the office. It doesn't take much imagination to figure out where we went from there. Another thing I got involved in was taking it to the court. There was a policy that any disagreement between 2 inmates could be settled by a challenge to a fight. We gathered on the basketball court surrounded by inmates, so neither of us could run. The issue was settled by a bloody bare-knuckles fist fight. Only when one of us gave up or could not go anymore, would it be stopped. The staff greatly enjoyed these, cheering loudly for their favorite. They also had money bet on these sordid events. I wound up on the grub crew several times. There was 2 things that happened on that crew that I still think of today. One was the nasty old man who controlled the grub crew, telling us that he hoped we would try to run so he could shoot and kill us. Another memory involved the White House. We were cleaning the grounds in that area when we received a rare 5-minute break. We had just sat down and leaned against the back of the building when the large fan suddenly started. That fan alone could scare the hell out of you, but then we heard Mr. Hatton ask someone if he felt like killing a nigger today. He then began the beating and the young boy was pleading and begging. We quickly moved away because we knew if anyone saw us we would go down. The young black boy, who looked about 10 years old, wasn't killed but he was quite bloody when they left. One evening I was called out by a man I had never seen before. I was told to go with him, I figured to the White House. I was trying to prepare my mind for that when we went on past the place. We ended up at the infirmary where I was given a gown. I was then told that they were going to remove my tonsils. I asked if there was a problem with my tonsils as they had never checked me out before. Their answer floored me. They pulled my tonsils that night, they said, because they needed the practice and they had a new inmate assistant that wanted to see how it was done. Later, when I was able to talk, I told the inmate assistant that I was awake during the surgery. He said that was impossible, but I told him what they were talking about and who said what. He ran and got the old decrepit doctor who told me, "Don't worry about it, at least you didn't bleed to death." While in the infirmary, a fellow I knew was in the bed next to me. When no one was around, we talked. I knew he had stolen one of the state's cars and tried to escape. But it was what happened after he was caught that remains with me till this very day. He was caught by a Florida highway patrolman, who brought him back. He was taken straight to the White House. In 1949 and 1950, escapees were beaten with a wooden paddle instead of the strap. After a few lashes he got up and kicked Mr. Dozier in the testicles. They had the patrolman block the door with his car and had a couple of deputies to help hold him down. He was given 150 lashes including beating him in the head to slow him down as he was putting up a good fight. He looked like someone who had tangled with a bear. After I left the infirmary, I never saw him again. There were 3 or 4 other boys in the infirmary at this same time, recovering from their spanking. I only remember one thing in all my time there that made me feel good. For the first 6 or 8 months, I worked in the sewing room in the laundry. Early one morning, while sorting shirts, I was looking out the window facing the highway. I saw an inmate run around the corner of the building and hunker down behind a little engine cover in the building. A few minutes later, I saw a car coming up the highway. It stopped directly in line with where the inmate was hiding and the rear door flew open. He ran and jumped in the car and away they went. I watched until they were out of sight. I knew that this one got clean away. He would never be back. They would run all through the woods looking for him, but they would never see him again. He was free. And then a warm and happy feeling came over me because I felt like I had helped him escape. I could have pointed him out, but I didn't, and I am so glad. Wherever he is today, let me thank him for letting me share a few minutes of his freedom. But I had to keep it to myself and stop smiling. A smile there would earn you a White House visit. The staff used to brag about being a school, and I suppose they were. And I must admit that they did teach me lessons that became part of me and a part of my life for 60 years after I left. They taught me to hate, lie, be a loner, don't let anyone become close. They taught me to disrespect others, and especially anyone or anything that has to do with authority, to be argumentative, uncooperative, and violent. Their teachings led to a long list of failures and disappointments in life. Where am I today? Well, I still have bad dreams of the Florida Industrial School. I have night terrors and panic attacks. I have had psychological consultation, and that has helped me refocus. I have come to see that for 60 years, I was unsure of who I really am. Now I have self-respect and learned that I am not an animal or lower. My question is, was all of this the intent of the state of Florida? Was torture the purpose? Is that the state's view on how to treat its children? I hope not.
It seemed as though I was at the mercy of everyone and anyone. This was around 1961 or so. I remember something terrible, very terrible happened there. It was the most horrible night of my life. I can't forget that night. It has become engraved in my mind, and I have become a very angry man and am tortured with this memory. The first time I remember the name or title, the White House, I was around 11 years old. I was placed in a reform school, namely a place called Mariana School for Boys. I was sent there for skipping school, by Judge Howell in Tampa, Florida. It was a place of inhumane torture and corporal punishment. I remember one night a man came into the cottage I was in, number 8 Pope Cottage. I was awakened, I guess around midnight, by a Mr. Sealander. He drove an Austin Healey or MG convertible, I believe it was green or black. He was a small framed man, dark hair with a mustache. He seemed like he was possibly from an English heritage. He awakened me. I was sleeping soundly, in hospital pajamas. They were light blue and very thin. When he awakened me, he took me to his personal car and drove to a building behind the kitchen, named the White House. There was one door in the front, facing, I think, east. It was a small building. I remember this big door opening with a key in a corridor, very narrow, and on each side of this hallway there was a small room on either side without doors. The rooms only had a small bed in it. It seems all the rooms looked to be the same size. I asked him why I was there, but he didn't answer me. he was waiting for someone else to arrive there. Right inside the door, there was a small bed, I think. I sat there waiting and very scared. I looked above my head on the wall, or the wall behind me and above me. At first I thought they were going to just lock me up. But after I saw those straps, long ones, thick ones, short ones, they reminded me of razor straps on the side of a barber's chair. 2 more men arrived. One only had one arm, Mr. Tidwell and Mr. Walter. After seeing those straps, I knew something horrible was going to happen to me. It just seems to fall into place. I was taken into a room and placed on a small bed about 3 feet wide, maybe 5 or 6 feet long. The bed was near the floor and had a filthy mattress on it. I was told to hold on to the end of the bed and not to move or cry out. I then remember the sound of something cutting the air, followed by a pain I can't describe. The most horrible pain a human being can imagine. It hurt so terribly bad, I would try and move to get up off the bed. God, please make them stop beating me. But they beat me, so bad. I can't write any more about this. God, make them stop. I have to leave before my kids get here. I don't want them to see me this way. I didn't think such pain existed, but it was very real. I can never forget the pain and fright I felt. Today I really believe no one, not even a POW anywhere, ever felt such pain, physical and mental pain. The smell of sweat and blood on the bed, the sound of the large fan, that somewhat drowned out the sound of the screams. My only thought was, God, please make them stop beating me. I can't imagine how I survived that pain, physical, mental and emotionally. God, please stop this, please. I get very angry when I think of what they did to my body, only 10 or 11 years old. I can still smell the inside of that small building and the very small bed with those little bodies with blood, sweat, and the stench in those rooms. They weren't sick. They enjoyed what they did. And I only wish that I could kill those bastards. No one can even imagine the pain I endured. Ellis Edward, Adams Sr.
Death in the laundry. I guess I will never forget the day that I began to realize that a single human life was not so unimportant after all. I was 13 years old and had been sentenced to the Florida School for Boys Reformatory at Marianna for running away from the Children's Home Society orphanage in Jacksonville, Florida. Other than going into the Spring Park School building, through an open window, searching for food, climbing a tree, riding one of the girls' bicycles and going to the bathroom without asking permission, I had never been in any serious trouble before. Incorrigible child, and unable to follow instruction, was the main reason Judge Marion Gooding sentenced me to that institution until I turned 18. I was assigned to Cottage 12. The Cleveland cottage under the direction of Robert Sealander, our cottage house father. I was also assigned to work in the institution's dry cleaning department, which was attached to the left side of the laundry building. One afternoon I was on the right-hand press when I heard a large commotion outside on the large cement walkway. Turning to look, I did not see our instructor, so I walked to the double doorway and peeked outside. Boys were running in every direction. Not knowing if something was going to blow up, I yelled, "What happened?" "He's dead and he's in the tumble dryer," screamed a crying boy. Just at that moment, I saw my instructor walking toward me. I ran over to the press and began working on the uniforms. When he entered the room, I turned my head and asked, "Who's dead?" "Another one of you little fuckers just bit the dust," he replied. "What do you mean? Just shut up and get back to work." Several minutes later, he got up from his desk and walked outside as 5 or 6 cars pulled up to the walkway. Several lines of boys were marching, 2 abreast down the roadway. As our instructor walked down the ramp, I walked over to the large window and peered outside. Unable to see down the ramp, I walked to the door and stuck my head outside to see what was happening. Within 10 minutes, the area was cleared of boys and several men came out of the laundry carrying what appeared to be a body covered in a sheet or a white blanket. The bundle was thrown into the back seat of a car and fell to the floorboard. The doors were closed and the car drove away at a fast rate of speed. I ran back to my workstation and turned off the steam valves and got myself ready to go back to my cottage. 10, maybe 15 minutes later, our supervisor returned and told us to return to our assigned units. On the way back to the Cleveland cottage, I heard that the boy killed was a black boy, another stated it was a white boy. I was rather confused as the white and black boys were always kept separate. I have always wondered if a black boy was there to deliver dirty laundry to the laundry, as there was a tug sitting outside the building and was not removed until 3 days later. I heard that he had got right up into the face of the laundry instructor and began cursing him. The man instructed several of the boys to take the boy and place him in the tumble dryer, which they did. Several days later, word was going around the institution that several of the cottage house fathers were heard talking about the boy's body having been taken out in the woods and dumped in a shallow grave along with his personal possessions.
Thank you for watching part 2 of my Florida School for Boys Building Exploration video. Please join me in part 3 as I continue to explore the campus grounds and tell the stories of some of the boys who were sentenced to the Florida School for Boys. I feel it's very important to get their stories out. Please like, share, and subscribe, and once again, thank you.